Today we journey into the past and uncover the mysteries of Jesus' imprisonment in Caiaphas' house. This ancient site stands as a poignant reminder of the events that shaped the course of Christianity. We will show you the dungeon Jesus was possibly imprisoned in the night before his crucifixion. Are you ready to embark on this extraordinary pilgrimage of faith and history? Do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates on exciting archaeological places and discoveries showing Bible history. How did Jesus end up in the house of Caiaphas? After the Last Supper, Jesus and his disciples went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. It was there that Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' disciples, betrayed him by identifying him with a kiss to the temple guards and a cohort of Roman soldiers. This event led to Jesus' arrest. Following the arrest, Jesus was brought before the Sanhedrin, the supreme Jewish council in Jerusalem, which was presided over by the high priest Caiaphas. This happened in the house of Caiaphas, as is explained in the Gospel of John. John says in chapter 18 that he secretly followed Jesus after his arrest and he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. This also became the place where Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times. There, in the house of Caiaphas, the Sanhedrin accused Jesus of various charges, including blasphemy and claiming to be the Messiah, the Son of God. They sought to find evidence to put him to death. During this trial, false witnesses came forward to testify against Jesus, but their testimonies did not align. Despite the lack of substantial evidence, Caiaphas, seeking to protect the Jewish establishment and their authority, asked Jesus if he was the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus affirmed his divine identity, and Caiaphas deemed it as blasphemy, sealing Jesus' fate. Early in the morning, the Sanhedrin handed Jesus over to the Roman authorities, specifically Pontius Pilate, as they lacked the authority to carry out capital punishment under Roman rule. This ultimately led to Jesus' trial before Pilate, which paved the way for his crucifixion. Do we know where Jesus' interrogation by the Sanhedrin took place? Is the house of Caiaphas known? A pilgrim from Bordeaux wrote about his pilgrimage to Jerusalem in 333 AD. He wrote, "Going up from the pool of Siloam to Mount Zion, one would come across the house of the priest Caiaphas. It is in this place that a church was built in AD 457. After the Crusaders' time, the church fell into ruin and was only rebuilt in 1931. But it is for 100% sure located on the spot that from ancient times has been pointed out as the house of Caiaphas. The church is called Church of St. Peter in Gallicantu. Gallicantu means cock's crow, in remembrance of Peter's denial of Christ. The Gallicantu church stands on the eastern slope of Mount Zion and holds great importance in Christian tradition due to its association with events from Jesus' final days. One of the key features of the Gallicantu church is the Steps of Sorrow. These are the actual stone steps that pilgrims believe Jesus climbed on the night of his arrest, leading up to the house of Caiaphas. The church's location on Mount Zion offers stunning panoramic views of Jerusalem, including the Old City, the Kidron Valley, and the Mount of Olives. One of the chapels within the church is known as the Chapel of the Cock's Crow. According to tradition, it marks the spot where Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times before the cock crowed. The Gallicantu Church is a popular pilgrimage site for Christians from around the world, who come to connect with the events of Jesus' final days and to reflect on the significance of his sacrifice. Archaeological evidence lines up with the church tradition of pointing to this area as the house of Caiaphas. The primary archaeological evidence linking the site of the Church of St. Peter in Gallicantu to the house of Caiaphas includes the following. In 1990, an archaeological excavation in the vicinity of the church uncovered a burial cave complex. One of the ossuaries found in this cave bore the inscription, "Joseph son of Caiaphas" in Aramaic. This finding directly connects the location to the biblical figure of Caiaphas, the high priest, mentioned in the Gospels. Archaeologists have also unearthed the remains of a large residential building at a level under the modern-day church, dating back to the Second Temple period. The architecture and size of the structure align with the type of dwelling that would be expected for a prominent figure like the high priest. The excavations revealed several cisterns and a ritual bath adjacent to the residential building. These features suggest that the occupants of the house observed Jewish purification rituals, further supporting the association with a high priestly residence. Various pottery fragments and other artifacts found at the site date to the time of the Second Temple, providing additional historical context and supporting the identification of the location with the high priest's residence. The house of Caiaphas was a sprawling complex with various rooms and courtyards, indicating its opulence and importance in ancient Jerusalem. As the residence of the high priest, it served as a center of religious and political power, making it a pivotal location during Jesus' time. Among the intriguing features of Caiaphas' house is the presence of a dungeon or holding area. This dungeon is thought to have been used to detain criminals or prisoners awaiting trial. This dungeon and a guardroom next to it were both hewn out of a bedrock. A small window from the guardroom served as a peephole for a guard standing on a stone block. The only access to the dungeon was through a shaft from above, so the prisoner would have been lowered and raised by means of a rope harness. A mosaic depicting Jesus in such a harness is outside on the south wall of the church now standing on the place. Tourists nowadays are going down into this dungeon as the prison of Christ. How likely is it that Jesus really was a prisoner here? There is little doubt that the site identified as the house of Caiaphas is the real house of Caiaphas. All archaeological finds fit with the grandeur of the palace of the high priest. It is confirmed by church tradition from the earliest centuries AD. And the clincher is the 1990 find of an ossuary with the name of Caiaphas inscribed in it. So yes, in all probability here is the place Jesus was interrogated by the Sanhedrin and was denied by Peter. But did the dungeon serve as Jesus' prison cell? The first question to be asked is whether there would be time enough for Jesus to be lowered into a dungeon and pulled up again during his stay in Caiaphas' house. Jesus' arrest was after the Last Supper, a walk to Gethsemane, and several hours of prayer by Jesus while the disciples slept. So Jesus' arrest was probably around midnight or even later. When the rooster crowed, at the first crack of dawn around 5 a.m., Luke 22 says, "The Lord turned and looked at Peter." Clearly, at 5 a.m. Jesus was not in a dungeon but in a place where he could turn and look at Peter, who was in the courtyard. Immediately after, Jesus was interrogated again. Caiaphas came to the conclusion that Jesus blasphemed God by claiming to be God's son, and sent him on to Pontius Pilate, where he arrived before 6 a.m. So Jesus obviously cannot have been in the dungeon after 5 a.m. The only opportunity to be imprisoned in the dungeon was between his arrival at Caiaphas' house sometime after midnight and when the rooster crowed before dawn. After arresting him, the soldiers first brought Jesus to Annas, who was a former high priest, Caiaphas' father-in-law, and the power behind the throne. He interrogated Jesus, and later sent him on to Caiaphas. It is not impossible that after arriving Jesus was lowered into the dungeon and later lifted out for his second interrogation before the Sanhedrin, that had gathered in the house of Caiaphas that night. But for all the interrogations going on, it seems a narrow fit. It does not seem likely that for such a short time, probably 1 or at the most 2 hours, a prisoner would be lowered into the dungeon. However, there is an even stronger argument against Jesus' imprisonment here. The question is this a prison at all? Why would the high priest have a prison in his home? It was not the high priest's job to keep prisoners. Actually, the house of Caiaphas does not have just this one underground cellar. Visitors to the site are presented with a set of underground caves. These were discovered, or rediscovered, in 1888. In the cellar now mentioned as the Prison of Christ, 11 crosses were found engraved on the walls. Prompted by the dungeon-like appearance, it seems that early Christians identified the cave as the location of Jesus' imprisonment. However, from an archaeological point of view, this prison seems to really be a 1st century AD Jewish ritual bath, which was later deepened and turned into a cistern to hold water. So though the house of Caiaphas most likely indeed is the place where Jesus faced Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin before being taken to Pilate, for several reasons it is very unlikely that he was prisoner in the cellar now named Prison of Christ.